Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 206 of the Last Round Podcast here in 2023, going on the 5th year of existence for the Last Round Podcast. We appreciate you if you've been along with us for the ride since the beginning or just recently joined. Thank you for giving us your time. We definitely appreciate it. We have another guest, back-to-back weeks with guest of the week here on the Last Round Podcast. He's a former boxing writer for Boxing Monthly, and he's a current podcaster. Callum from Below the Belt Podcast joins us this week here on the Last Round. Thank you for joining us, Callum.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me. 206 in 5 years. I was sat here straight away. What's that? It's about 40 a year.
Well, we actually have more than that because the 206 is weekly episodes that we put out, but we have a lot of bonus ones that we've done at fights or at gyms or media events. So I think we're closer, Mike, maybe to 300?
Yeah, I would imagine something like that.
Right, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So we just there's a lot of bonus content. How many do you guys have?
So official episodes, we've done 152, but like you, we'll do a lot of, I always call them 0.5s. So 86.5 will be at a gym, or it'll be after a fight, or it'll be something like that. So there's a dozen or so of those like 0.5s. So on the last podcast, when we did 150, I worked out that we average every 2 weeks, something like that. So it's about when we do it every 2 weeks, something like that.
Hey, as long as it works, right? It works out. So, Callum, obviously we appreciate, like I mentioned, you jumping on here on the Last Round. I know we've been trying to schedule this for quite a while. So definitely we definitely appreciate that we got around to getting you on here. But for people who might not be aware of who you are, mostly maybe our American audience, because we know you're from the UK, can you kind of give us a little background of who you are and how you got into this crazy world we call boxing?
Yeah, so obviously my name's Cal, and how did I start? I started by doing boxing writing. I started out doing my own posts, my own kind of WordPress account and writing, whether it was post-fight reports or just overall kind of think pieces and things like that. I was lucky enough that I support the same football or soccer team as a guy called Mark Butcher, who is kind of a god in my eyes, at least, but also in terms of boxing writing circles, he's someone that's quite well known amongst boxing writers. And we became fast friends, and he would help me with my writing and things like that. And so I started to write for Boxing Monthly magazine, and again would do previews, fight reviews, think pieces, things like that. And then we would do this thing every week called The Big Question. And it would just keep my pen sharp. It was just something that we would just write a couple of hundred words about whatever the big news topic was at the time. So I wrote for Boxing Monthly for a time for their website. Managed to get into the magazine one time as well, and then started doing the podcast Below the Belt in 2016, I believe it was. It was 2016, and Mark Butcher again. He hosted our first episode. Our first episode was just before Frampton Quigg. And we did the preview for that. I remember it, and I was the only one that picked Frampton actually out of everyone in the room on the day. And so that was how we started. We started Below the Belt in 2016. We've had lots of different people come in and out, but the same core people are still there and still doing it. It's a slog, as you know. Doing podcasting, it's a slog. It can be a full-time job, but when it goes well and you do a good podcast, it makes it all worth it. So that's kind of my background in boxing.
Absolutely. And obviously the podcast, we'll touch on it later again, but it's available. I think you said everywhere, all the big podcasting platforms, right? YouTube.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's everywhere. We tend to average he tends to average once a fortnight, but sometimes if something's going on, so like, for example, we've obviously got Eubank, the Eubank card coming up, and then after that, it's the Anthony Yard card coming up. So I imagine I'll probably knock out 2 or 3 in the next couple of weeks, and then I might go quiet for a couple of weeks. So it just very much depends. It very much depends on what's going on in the world.
No, we get it. We definitely get it. All right, jumping right back into it. Fight reviews this past Saturday, the 14th of January, from the Turning Stone Resort. I always mess that one up. And Casino in New York on ESPN. A heavyweight clash. Efe Ajagba gets the unanimous decision win over 10 rounds over Stephen Shaw by scores of 96-94 twice. Mike, I'm going to start with you. What did you think about Ajagba's win and victory here?
I picked him to lose. I thought Shaw would actually beat him, to be honest with you. Don't really rate Ajagba. He's just a big unit that can kind of throw hands a little bit. You know, it's not that stylistically that good. I think when he reaches the top echelons of that division, I think he'll come unstuck. I thought Shaw did well for probably, I think, the first 3 rounds, and he just kind of gassed himself out and just decided to do that new Derek Chisora style thing of just sitting on the ropes and just using that for comfort. And that's how Ajagba kind of took over, really. As you can look at the scorecards, 96, 94, 3 times was pretty close, and he was the A-side fighter, so it probably was slightly closer than that, because we always know that A-side's probably 2 or 3 rounds up, depending on the promotion. But yeah, I don't see Ajagba winning anything. I don't see him winning a world title. I don't think he's anywhere in the same league as the Tyson Furies, the AJs, the Wilders, those sorts of guys. But at the minute he's getting in there and was knocking people out, but his last few fights he hasn't looked overly good. So I think it's a stylistic change or something like that for him, because I'm sure they thought he was probably going to get Stephen Shaw out of there, and he didn't. He came unstuck against Frank Sanchez as well. So
that's true. And obviously this was a heavyweight clash. Callum, for Ajagba, obviously coming out on the other side with the victory here, he's in a better position, to get, I guess, more significant names in that division. If he gets the opportunity, who do you think would be a decent opponent for Ajagba to fight sometime this year? Now that he's just coming off a victory like this, like, who would you want to see in the heavyweight division? Obviously,
well, yeah, as you were talking about him, he makes me think of Daniel Dubois a little bit. He's kind of, what Tyson Fury would call a big stiff idiot. It's there's nothing special really about him. But obviously he lost to Frank Sanchez. He got an early stoppage in his next fight, and then he's obviously got a decision win today. So he's trying things out. He's perhaps being a little bit more conservative and just trying to kind of polish his game. But Daniel Dubois, maybe, saw Tony Yoka's coming back. He's about to fight Carlos Takam. So maybe he looks at maybe fighting the winner or the loser of that. Maybe he looks to fight Carlos Takam and then go towards the Daniel Dubois fight. Daniel Dubois is in this kind of interesting place where he's got this regular belt, and it's kind of, he can fight these guys. He can fight these guys below the top level and have a belt on the line. So yeah, if Ajagba, carries on and wins fights and perhaps beats, a Carlos Takam or even Tony Yoka, maybe he goes towards Daniel Dubois, something like that.
How do you think a fight, mentioning Dubois, do you think Dubois would be the favorite in that fight against Ajagba?
I think it's weird. Do you know what? Location's so important. When you take a British fighter and an American fighter, where that fight lands is so important. It's not just the traveling; it's the officials as well, and the familiarity. When you box in Britain, you're always boxing in a 20x20 ring, whereas if you go to the States, it may depend on what state you're boxing in, the size of the ring. So I think if it was in Britain, I'd fancy Dubois. But I think perhaps if it was in America, then maybe Ajagba would have more of a chance. But I think I'd still fancy Dubois. I like Dubois. He's fun. He's not very good, but he's all action. He can be hurt. He can knock you out. So yeah, I think I'd fancy Dubois wherever it was. But I think it'd be an interesting contest.
Now, obviously Ajagba's, I believe he is signed, obviously, with Top Rank. Top Rank, another heavyweight, obviously probably the most popular, biggest one in the world, Tyson Fury. Do you think, and we see all the time with these promoters and their stables, they have different weight classes and stuff. Do you think that Top Rank, Callum, possibly uses a Jagba? They possibly signed him to keep him as a potential option for Tyson Fury, just in case Fury couldn't, they couldn't secure a big name for him or a more significant opponent, and a Jagba's there like, oh, okay, well, he's our plan B. He's a heavyweight. He's been on ESPN a couple times. Do you think, that's a possible mentality over there at Top Rank?
I think it's a really hard sell. I think that would be a really, really hard sell to sell Tyson Fury against a Jagba. I think that'd be really difficult. But, I saw some murmurs today that, that Usyk wants 50-50 if he's to fight Tyson Fury over in the UK. And, I've said it before on Below the Belt. Don't be surprised if Tyson Fury finds a way out of fighting Usyk. He's never struck me as being really keen on making that fight or the Joshua fight. So yes, I guess it's possible. Bob Arum is arguably the greatest promoter of all time, and I've said this before. If I had a son or a daughter and I wanted them to go pro, I would put them with Top Rank. They're that good. They're that good at promoting. But I think that fight's a tough sell. To answer your question,
you must be thinking of someone. You must be thinking of someone else, Callum. Tyson Fury will fight for free.
That's true. We forgot about that.
He doesn't fight for money, Callum.
That's true.
And he donates it all to charity, right? No one's ever followed it up, but he donates it all to charity.
There's no homeless left in the UK. They've all got nice houses now.
Now, Mike, turning our attention to Stephen Shaw, first loss of his career, 18-1. He was undefeated before. Where do we see him go from here? And do we know how old he is?
Stephen Shaw, I'm not too sure. I think late 20s.
Is he? 30? Yeah. So where do we see somebody like them? 18-1, first professional loss as a professional. I think, at 30 years old, he still has a lot to offer, right?
No, I think he does. And then you've got somebody on this card that obviously, just took another loss themselves. So you could stick him in there, him and Guido could get it on. Two heavyweights on the same card, both, took a loss. Guido obviously due to a cut. Turn it around and have those two fight each other, but one of them get a victory, both coming off losses. It's kind of what fighters tend to do, right? One's on a loss. Let's put them together.
Right. I mean, and that's a good point that I was going to touch on as we went through. Guido obviously got stopped. It was a stop due to a cut, the doctor's stoppage. Jonathan Rice got the 7th round TKO in that fight. That was another heavyweight clash. So, we see this a lot. Callum, I'm sure you, obviously as a boxing fan, being in the media like this, we see this a lot where you see these promoters put these fighters who are all in the same weight class, maybe like a co-main or whatever, and the main event, because in the subsequent fight after this event, they're thinking, oh, okay, we can put this guy who just won this fight in the co-main and this guy who just won in the main event. We can match them up in our next event and, kind of go from there, right? I mean, that's common, right?
Oh, yeah. Over in England, it happens all the time. The America, you guys always talk about fights marinating and, Bob Arum's kind of favorite terminology is, we've got to let it marinate for a while. And we did that as well. Amir Khan and Kell Brook is a good example of that. They put those two in separate fights for a while and just kind of let it marinate or build up for a little while. And then eventually they kind of make the fight. And the same with, kind of Frampton and Quigg back in the day, they would fight separate fights and then eventually they would get there. I think a guy like Stephen Shaw, he's going to have to win a fight where he's not expected to win now. And he's going to have to he might even have to take short money, but bet on yourself, get that win and then go. But,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then also on the card, Abraham Nova gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Adam Blue Nose Lopez by scores of 98-90 twice and 97-91. Blue Nose Lopez has been a guest on the last round here, I think once or twice. I know we had him once. I think it was for sure twice. Mike, I'll start with you. What did you think about Nova's victory over Lopez here?
It's upsetting for us. Obviously, we know Adam from being like a local fight around here. I thought he would. I thought he had a good chance of winning it, but I knew it was going to be a difficult fight. Nova just been looking good, and Lopez to me just at times he's a little bit one-dimensional, and I think he doesn't really kind of change up the pace. He kind of like recycles a lot of the same things like over and over and over again of like in terms of what he does in the ring. And it's just disappointing because I actually thought he beat Isaac Dogbe, back in 2021. Look where Dogbe's gone since then. When Lopez obviously since then had a no contest, and then he just lost to Nova, so he's kind of that's his fourth defeat now. So where does Adam go from there? Because it's surprising because he's only actually 26.
Yeah,
he's still relatively young. So if I was him, I would take a little bit of time off, concentrate, on in the ring for a little bit, even take like a year, something like that, and just try to maybe reinvent himself and then come back. Because like Callum said, Top Rank is a great promotion. They match really, really, really well. They promote their fighters really, really well as well. So just take some time, maybe look at maybe changing trainer, something like that, and then come back in, and hopefully he can, go from there because he's relatively young.
So he's still training and has been for a while with Buddy McGirt out here in the Los Angeles area. You brought up the potential of maybe it's a trainer change. Since he's kind of suffered a couple defeats now, and he's only 26. Callum, I'll pose this question to you. If there's a potential for somebody like the 26-year-old Adam Blue Nose Lopez to change trainers from Buddy McGirt, who should he go with?
So he's still young enough where he can learn. So, we were speaking about Anthony Joshua and him changing trainer, but he's 32 years old. So, trying to learn something different, it's a bit late in the day for him. But for Lopez, I think Robert Garcia perhaps, but Robert Garcia is quite an aggressive coach. And I think, looking at the fight, he started quite well, but then gets dropped twice, and it kind of went downhill from there. So I think he may need someone a little bit cuter, someone a little bit more defensive, someone that will perhaps help him manage fights a bit better, manage the pace, but also tactically as well. I'm just trying to think who that might be, and you want it to be maybe Robert Garcia, maybe.
Robert Garcia. I mean, it logistically and geographically it could work because Robert Garcia is also in Southern California.
That's what I was thinking.
So it could work. You know who I was, and I've been mentioning his name a lot every time we touch on this topic. But we also have he's up in the Big Bear Mountains, but we also have Abel Sanchez. And he's kind of been under the radar, ever since trying to Triple G left his stable. I
don't rate him.
Say it again.
I don't rate him.
Abel Sanchez?
Yeah, don't rate him.
Really? Tell us why. Tell us why.
Name another fighter that he's had apart from Triple G. I probably could have coached Triple G. And Manny Pacquiao. I think that they're the sort of fighters that could go with any trainer, and you could do whatever you want. Kind of like Tyson Fury. Like everyone's touched on Tyson Fury. Ben Davidson came from nowhere and got Tyson Fury, and look what he did. But Tyson Fury is an enigma. Tyson Fury got that much of a high boxing IQ. You could sit in the corner and talk about movies, and then he goes out for the next round and does something unbelievable because of his high boxing IQ. And I think Triple G was just so heavy-handed, so powerful and stuff like that. He was going to blow people away regardless of who was in his corner. Look at what he does. He doesn't really do much pads. He was nearly retired and was doing construction until Triple G came out of nowhere, was brought in by Tom Loeffler. Like, name another fighter that he's done something like that.
No, you're right. I'll give you that. I don't know. I just feel I've been up to that gym like 3 times, and it was all Triple G workouts. And and then we've seen interviews where he talks. I've interviewed Sanchez in Vegas twice, and and then he's talked about Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz used to train with Abel Sanchez, and I think after one fight he left, and then I think Abel Sanchez. I mean, we get one side of the story, but Abel Sanchez had said that well, he didn't want to train up here, because Sanchez doesn't want to leave Big Bear. That's where he has his gym and all that. I think in terms of his discipline factor, like he stays on that line. And, some fighters don't want to handle that, especially when they kind of become more popular and make more money. But I mean, you're right. If you think about the only high profile success story that he's had, it would be Triple G. I mean, he's had other fighters come and go here and there, but I don't know. I just feel like, and I don't know how old he is now. Maybe he's in his late 60s or something like that. But
he lived off that. Everybody believing back in the day that going up and fighting at altitude was going to help you at a fight. And then obviously, science evolved and people realized that it only helps if you're fighting at high altitude, because when you come back down to normal level, you've got no impact. It just disappears. So people used to go to Big Bear believing that, and he was the only gym up there, apart from Shane Mosley, I think has one up there now. But ever since then, what's he done? He's never taken anybody from a young fighter with potential to a world championship. He just was given Triple G by Tom Loeffler and took him, and just kind of living off the back of that.
Callum, what's your take on a trainer like Abel Sanchez?
Didn't he train Murat Gassiev?
Yes, yeah, he did.
Gassiev, yeah.
And he got him to a world title, unified world title.
He did.
But I agree with you about him. I remember the Super Series final where he lost to Usyk. He didn't win a round. And I remember watching, and they would go into the corner, and I always like to listen to what the trainer was saying. And he was so uninspiring in the corner. And I've noticed that with him. And I think it may have been the second Canelo fight with Triple G as well. I remember just thinking, what are you saying to this guy? You're not saying anything tangible, something that he can actually implement in the ring in order to change the course of the fight. But it really stood out to me in the Usyk Gassiev fight, how he couldn't inspire his fighter, or couldn't give his fighter the tactical kind of input in order to change the course of the fight. He just let the fight coast, and Usyk won handily in the end. And that was a fight that everyone expected it would be really close, just because of how well Gassiev had performed in the tournament. So I actually agree. I'm not a fan of Abel Sanchez as a trainer, particularly in the corner. Obviously, I've not been in the gym with him, but in the corner, he doesn't wow me. But sometimes, and I've been told this by trainers in the past, just because it's not wowing you doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to the fighter. You're not with them in the gym every day, and these small things that trainers say to fighters can mean so much more to the fighter themselves than they do to you or I. So I try to give trainers the benefit of the doubt, but I am inclined to agree. I'm not a fan.
There's also the factor of him being in Big Bear, and he doesn't want to move away from that area. He won't go generally anywhere else to train. He has to have the fighters come to him. So Callum, at least in the UK, I might know this as well, but I'll ask you, Callum, at least in the UK, is there anybody, a trainer out there who's in a geographical location like Big Bear in Southern California, where you have to go up the mountain and you have to train up there? You're kind of isolated in the snow and, kind of away from civilization for a while. Is there a trainer who's in a geographical location like that in the UK that might be in the same situation that Abel Sanchez is in?
Yeah, it's funny, because America's a much bigger country than Britain is, and therefore the distances are that much greater when you're talking about traveling. But that doesn't stop the mental block for fighters when it comes to moving. They won't want to leave their family. They don't want to leave where they're from. Even if we're talking about going from Birmingham to Manchester, which is, probably an hour and a half drive, something like that. Fighters won't want to do it. They won't want to do it. They want to stay with their family. They want to stay where they are. They don't like being away from their family. They don't like being away from their kids. So to ask me to pick a trainer, it's all of them. Their gym is where they are. And if you want to train with them, you go to their gym and you live where they live, and that's it. So there's no you don't have trainers really that, Joe Gallagher's not going to go down to London to train a fighter. Shane McGuigan's not going to leave London, or you go to the gym in Battersea and you train with Shane McGuigan. They're not traveling around for you. It's not like a barber. They're not going to fly out to you and give you a trim. You go to their gym and you work in the gym with them.
Now, who would you say, Callum, and Mike, I'll ask you after this, who would you say is the strictest trainer in Britain, in the UK, in terms of like discipline factor, that from what you've seen, what you've heard, your experience over
there? Probably Mark Tibbs. I think Mark Tibbs has a reputation for being quite a strict trainer. He obviously trained Dylan White for a good while. He's Conor Benn's trainer. We won't talk about that. But he's a good trainer, but he has a reputation of being incredibly strict. Paul Zanon, who I record Blow the Belt with, he wrote Jimmy Tibbs' book. His dad, he wrote the book for him, so he's very close with them. And I've been lucky enough to spend time at the gym with Jimmy and with Mark. And yeah, they don't suffer any falls in that gym. I'd say Mark Tibbs.
Mike, do you agree with that, Mark Tibbs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Callum has a better, overlook of it than me. I got kind of immersed in the boxing scene more when I moved over here. But yeah, from going what I've heard over the times, I would say I would probably agree with that, Mark, and Jimmy.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And then just to kind of put a bow on it, who's the strictest trainer in the United States? Callum, who do you think?
I imagine Virgil Hunter is quite strict. I can imagine he is. Freddie Roach, no, I imagine he's quite hands-off. Derek James, he doesn't suffer falls. Breadman, no. Buddy McGurr, he's been around a long time. It's difficult. It's difficult, to answer that in America. Not being in the gyms and being around the gyms. I think Verge. Yeah.
What do you think, Mike?
I'll go with two. Teddy Atlas, because he always says that he doesn't even train anybody unless he speaks to them and he knows they're going to buy in and give 100%. And then I would say the Reynosos, because they got rid of Ryan Garcia and they got rid of Andy Ruiz, because both of them were messing around and not training and turning up late. And I think they thought, we don't need the money. They've made a lot of money from Canelo, that you're probably going to bring the gym down in terms of what they were doing. So they got rid of them.
Good shout.
Yeah. I completely overlooked the Reynosos. I think that's true, and I think even Oscar Valdez, who, trains under Eddie Reynoso, has also kind of, indicated that in interviews, saying that, we were training with the best fighter in the world. He's training right next to us. And, if we're not giving just as much energy as he is, he'll notice it, and they'll all notice and like, hey man, not everybody gets to train here with us. You got to get on the bandwagon here. So, I mean, yeah, I can see that. I also kind of think maybe Buddy McGirt or maybe not. What do you think, Mike?
I need to watch what I'm saying here, because I'm slagging off a lot of old trainers and people are going to listen to this. It's like anything in life, right? When you've been doing a job for a long, long time, when I've gone to a lot of the gyms and, Buddy McGurk and some of the older trainers, they kind of take a little bit of a back step and they kind of sit down and they're sat in the chair and they're sat around with the boys and they're talking, like the old war stories and stuff like that. And, they're paying attention to what the fighters are doing, but I don't know, like it's not like 100%. I'm sure like some of that, like, that hunger's kind of gone a little bit. They do take a little bit of a backward step. I'm sure if it was a huge, huge fight and there was a huge, huge name, like when he had Dylan White, I'm sure he probably gave Dylan White, 110%. But I also wasn't overly impressed with Buddy when he said that he'd never seen Dylan White fight. And he
did say that.
Stuff like that to me, I was kind of like, what, if I was a professional fighter, like I would want my coach to still be 100% immersed in the boxing world. I want them to be watching a lot of fights and stuff like that. And I know that's hard. I know he has a family, he has kids and stuff like that. And I'm sure when he leaves the gym, some people like to completely switch off because it's too much. But me personally, I would like them to still be a bit of a boxing nerd like myself. And like all three of us are, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Yeah, I get it. All right, moving on. Fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 21st of January, from the Manchester Arena in Manchester on Sky pay-per-view. Chris Eubank Jr., 32-2, goes up against Liam Beefy Smith, 32-3-1. All right, Callum, what's your take on this fight? What do you think?
It's a really interesting fight, and people, I'm in a WhatsApp group with all the Boxing Monthly guys, and I could never protest to know as much about boxing as they do, and every day's an education with them, and one or two of them fancy Smith. They do fancy Smith. They think Smith that Eubank has he's wasted a lot of time. Eubank, he's wasted a lot of his career, a lot of inactivity, a lot of just kind of chasing silly fights like Kell Brook that perhaps he didn't need to. And Liam Smith, you look at Liam Smith, he's on a run. He's on a pretty decent run. There was the Anthony Fowler fight. Some people fancied Anthony Fowler. There was the Jesse Vargas fight, which he boxed quite well, and and he's got a stoppage since then as well. So you look at Liam Smith and you look at Eubank and his trajectory, and you can see why some people would fancy Liam Smith to win. I don't fancy Liam Smith to win. I think for me it's about size, and Liam Smith for me is a classic Joe Gallagher fighter. He dines out on being really big at the weight, and you look at Joe Gallagher fighters over the years, they tend to be huge at the weight, and they tend to use size and strength to kind of dominate their opponents. And you look at a guy like Scott Quigg, Joe Gallagher fighter, really big at super bantam, then goes and fights Oscar Valdez, somebody bigger than him, and just gets fucking destroyed. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens with Joe Gallagher. Callum Smith as well. Callum Smith, huge at super middle, comes up against someone that's not intimidated by his size, gets done. It just seems to happen to Joe Gallagher fighters. They tend to dine out on size and being bigger. And Eubank is he's a middleweight. He's a big middleweight. He's faster. He's got a longer reach. He's fresher. I just can't see Liam Smith winning the fight. I think Eubank can beat him either way. I think he can box him long and keep it long, or I think if it turns into a tear up and turns into a real fight, I think Eubank will have that with him as well, because he's got the size. He's got a great chin. The only thing that worries me about Eubank is, and we've just been talking about trainers that we don't rate. I do not rate Roy Jones as a trainer at all. And I don't see how trying to implement a style change in a fighter like Chris Eubank is useful to him. If Freddie Roach was 10 years younger, I would love Chris Eubank to be with Freddie Roach. I think he'd be a great fit, because he's an attacking, aggressive coach that takes the things that you're good at. You look at Freddie Roach and the job he did with Miguel Cotto. He looked at him and said, we need to bring that left hook back, Miguel. And he just brought that back and just turned it and made him the fighter that he always had been at junior welter and at welter. And I'd love to see Eubank with a coach like that. I don't think Roy Jones suits him at all. Trying to box long and trying to be passive it's not his style. And I think as soon as he boxes it in his natural way, Eubank, he's brilliant to watch. But also, I think if he boxes like that, I think he'll get Liam Smith out there in 8-9 rounds.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it's hard to pick. Like Callum just said, essentially Liam Smith should be on a 7-fight winning streak, because when he fought Kurbanov, Kurbanov got the home decision. Liam Smith didn't lose that. He should be on a 7-fight winning streak, and should be on to a bigger fight, because that was like an eliminator, that fight. It's one of those fights, like Callum said, it depends which Chris Eubank Jr. comes out, because since he's gone to Roy Jones, he has tried to be a little bit more tricky, whereas before he was more just pressure, speed, and combinations. He would just get in there and throw so many fucking punches. You would just come in like, Jesus Christ, where are all these coming from? Like Honda from Street Fighter. That was one, right? He used to just go. That's pretty much what Eubank used to do. But it should be stylistically, it's a great matchup. Liam Smith really just pressure. I think Liam Smith for every single fight, the first 2 or 3 rounds, you think, Jesus, is he going to turn on? Like when he fought Fowler, he got dropped, I think, early on. And then after a while, I think the pressure just wears them down. they're just like, Jesus, is this guy like going to go away? Kind of like a smaller version of like a Joe Joyce, just walks you down. Kind of his defense is just taking stuff to the face, and eventually you just get tired, and he ends up stops you late on. So it's one of those where like I'm not trying to avoid the pick, but it's like after the first round, I could probably tell you like, okay, I think Eubank has chosen the wrong style today, and I think Smith's going to take it. But yeah, if he goes in and just is the usual, Chris Eubank Jr. kind of relies on, coming forward, lots of pressure, throwing lots of punches, I think he could take it. But yeah, it's definitely a good fight in terms of, stylistically, and we can't even pick. So just imagine everyone else, it's really just a toss 'em, I think. But the press conference and stuff this week is going to be amazing. Eubank has really sold himself even more since the Conor Benn incident. I think he's taken to the public even more, and some of the saying he only needs to be 60% to beat Liam Smith and stuff like that is just amazing. So going to be a great week.
What weight class? What weight is this fight at?
160.
Oh, it's 160.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I thought it was
that's what swings it to Eubank for me. It's the weight.
Yeah, that's what I see. Okay, now I know you guys are. Mike's kind of sitting on. He's like, I don't know. I need to know at first round. That's all I need to know. That swings it for Eubank as well. That's all I need to know. I mean, I think Liam Smith has the better pedigree as a fighter in terms of like technicality, technical skills, and stuff like that. He's got the family lineage and all that. They're a fighting family. But Eubank, obviously, you can't get to this level without being, some type of decent. He's a good fighter, and he's fought. How many fights has he had at 168? He's a big guy. He's a big guy. So I think that if you look at overall talent, pound for pound, maybe Liam Smith might be better from the technical standpoint, but Eubank Jr. has enough talent where he'll be fine. But what really pushes him over the edge, I think, in terms of being a favorite in this fight, is his size and his power over Smith. So that's why I asked. I was like, okay, if this is a catch weight, like him and Conor Benn were supposed to do, I think 157, 158 or something like that. I was like, okay, the drainage and weight that affects fighters. But if it's 160, I know he's fought at 168 a lot, but I feel like 160 his body could still adapt to it. Yeah, I think that swings it to Eubank for me. I think it's going to be a good fight, but I just think Liam Smith. How many fights has he had above 154? Do we know?
I don't know if he's had any. I don't think.
Is this the first one? Is this the first one?
I think so. I think
it's the first one above 154 because I thought it was too, but I was like, I have to be wrong. He's probably at least had one.
He's had one. He boxed in 2019. He had two. He had Roberto Garcia out in Phoenix at 159 3/4, and he boxed a guy called Mario Alberto Lozano at 159 as well. So he's had two fights at middleweight, but they were 3 years ago, and they were not anyone at the level that kind of Eubank's at. And,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an interesting matchup actually, because you look at both of them and I judge fighters pretty much the same way, historically and currently. What's their best win? I always ask myself, what's their best win? Look at Liam Smith, look at Chris Eubank Jr. Neither of them have amazing best wins, do they? You don't look at it and go, that was a great win. Do you know what I mean? You don't look at either one of them and go, oh, that was a really good win.
Jesse Vargas. Danny's a big fan of Jesse Vargas.
No, you know what though? That win that Smith got over Vargas, that was an exciting fight. Like if you watch it, like just as a fan, that was an exciting fight. They both went at it, and then Smith stopped it. So I thought that was a pretty. I think that gave somebody like Liam Smith another, I guess, a little bit more in his gas tank in his career after that win. Because but both of them at that time, Vargas and Smith, were kind of at a crossroads. Like, okay, whoever kind of loses this fight might, you might not get any more opportunities. And look at what happened. Smith stops him. Have we seen Vargas since? I don't think we have, right?
Wasn't Vargas like dipping his toe into politics around that time?
Yeah, but we haven't seen him like in the ring, have we?
Yeah, no, that's my point. That's my point. He'd like dipped his toe into politics, then takes this fight, which had been spoken about for a couple of years, hadn't it? And then he's gone again. It speaks to me like Sean Porter, like someone that was already halfway out the door. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So for me, I remember watching that the Liam Smith when he. Go on, sorry.
No, sorry. I was going to say it's a little bit tongue in cheek. We always talk about Jesse Vargas on here like that. Yeah, but I mean, surprisingly, Jesse Vargas was a former 2-weight world champion somehow. But
he was, yeah. He made a lot of money. Give him credit for that.
100%.
Okay, so Callum, you're going. Let me ask you this, because this is now that I'm looking at the fight and we're talking about it. Eubank Jr. wins. Obviously, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, they're still looking at matching him up with Conor Benn. There's still money there, even though Conor Benn's situation, there's still money there. So they're still obviously going to heavily consider it. But wouldn't you think that a more competitive matchup for Conor Benn would be against Liam Smith, because Liam Smith is a smaller fighter? I'm not saying it's preferred. I'm just saying, like, in terms of pound for pound against each other.
Yeah, I think it's probably a better. I see what you're saying. It's a better matchup because of the size differential. The reason that as well as I do, the reason that they made Benn Eubank was because of the family history and the history between their fathers, and that's why And you can speak to people in England that don't watch boxing or don't follow boxing currently, or people of in their 50s or 60s. They know Eubank and Benn. They know Chris Eubank, and they knew Nigel Benn, and that's why that fight would have been a really, really big fight. Liam Smith, yes, it's probably a better matchup for Conor Benn, and he put on a lot of weight to make 157, and it's going to be interesting to see how he can make welter again, if he can make welter and make it safely again, because he's going to box again. As much as I'd like to see him banned, he is going to box again. Yeah, I think it's going to happen. Eubank and Benn's probably going to happen, but Chris Eubank Jr. will not box 1 pound under 160 again. It will be at 160. It will not be a pound less.
So, let me put you on the spot, Callum. You're leaning towards Eubank in this fight against Liam Smith. How does it end?
I think Eubank stops him. I think he's going to stop him in about round 10, something like that.
Mike, what do you think? You picked Smith, right?
Yeah, I'd like to.
You didn't pick anybody.
No, I didn't. I sat on the fence. I'd like to see the first round because, like Callum said, it's like.
Come on, that's not fun. Give us something.
Oh no, I won't. You know me. I don't sit on the fence. I always give an opinion, and people don't like it. But I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Eubank. I do think it's close, but if Eubank sticks to his. Because Eubank, even if he comes out with that style, I hope that he's stubborn enough to go, fucking what, I'm just going to do Chris Eubank Jr. when I trained myself, and I will go back to that. And I think he would, because he's that strong-minded. If it's not working, whatever Roy Jones Jr. tells him to do, I think he'll revert to type, and he'll just go out there and do what he normally does. And I would also like Chris Eubank to win just to get him some more fights, just because he's a lot more, he brings the razzmatazz. Liam Smith doesn't. Whereas, Eubank, if he wins, then hopefully we'll get the Conor Benn fight. And then we may get something else. And it's just crazy to think he's had 34 fights and he's not really fought anybody of note, has he?
That's true. That's true.
It's like Billy Joe Saunders. He did a similar thing. He went on 2-weight world champion. And I'm on fire today. Callum Smith as well. Callum Smith, I thought he wasted his career as well. Apart from Canelo, who's he fought?
Oh, he became undisputed, didn't he? At the Super Series?
Yeah, who did he fight?
Well, that was an accomplishment. I give him credit for that. You don't give him credit for that?
No.
Really?
I'm going to get cancelled today, aren't I? I'm going to get cancelled after today.
Callum, do you give Callum Smith, let me say it again, Callum, our guest, do you give Callum Smith credit for that Super Series?
Not massively, because I think he got a bye in one of the rounds. He fought Eric Skoglund. I think it may have been in the semi-final. He was a kickboxer. And then he fought George Groves, who'd just come off a dislocated shoulder and was really rushed to get into that final. I say that as an unabashed George Groves fanboy that went to probably half a dozen George Groves fights, but he was clearly not right in that fight. And he retired straight afterwards, which says a lot. It says a lot. So I'm not. And as I said earlier, the Gallaghers love not weight cheats. They're not weight cheats, but they're always huge at the weight. And that's Callum Smith. He was massive at super middle. He won the WBA belt. And then he went life and death with John Ryder, really close fight with John Ryder, and then lost it to Canelo. So it's really hard to give him credit.
Callum's welcome back whenever. The Callum Smith, and then backing me up for Abel Sanchez. Whenever he wants, Callum can come back. Actually, Danny, after today, it's me and Callum.
I know I'm like 0 for 3 over here, man. I'm 0 for 3. So Callum, if Eubank Jr. takes this win, you said 10th round, stoppage, knockout. Let's just say that happens. Let's just say he gets the victory overall. Do we see the Conor Benn fight happen next sometime this year?
Yeah, because Eubank is very similar to David Haye. He reminds me of David Haye. He likes being a celebrity. He likes being famous. He likes making money. He doesn't strike me as someone that wants to be... He always talks about the fighting Golovkin and things like that, but it's a payday first for him. I think it's a payday first for him, and he'll look at Conor Benn and he'll go, well, I've got a bit of negotiating room here. I'm not weighing 157. It's going to be at 160. And at 160 pounds with no silly re-weigh clauses or whatever, he'll fucking destroy Conor Benn. He'd destroy him. I think it'd be no reason. I see no reason at all he wouldn't take that fight.
Do you guys think that a possible the Eubank Jr. Triple G fight is still possible, or is it over? Are we past that?
Yeah, is that me?
Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, the Sauerlands keep talking about it, right? So I'm guessing that they must have some sort of pot of money, because wasn't it like when they signed, they were going to have like kind of like a gimme and then a step-up fight, and then, the final boss, the master boss at the end of this game was supposed to be Triple G. But that seems to have, been stepped to one side because, now we're seeing you back in there with Liam Smith. I would say so. If you're Triple G now, I'm sure that you're looking at the biggest pots of money with the fights with the least resistance of you probably getting hurt or something like that. You're looking at a fair few gimme fights, wind your contract out, go off into the sunshine, because the last thing I think any of us want to see is Triple G in a hard fight getting laid out because he's given us, a decade of just great, great nights.
What do you think, Callum?
It's interesting what the Canelo rubber match has taken out of him. It wasn't a bloodbath, was it? It wasn't Gatti Ward free, was it? But, at 41 to go up to 168 and box 168 and then come back down to 160 and to fight someone young, it's going to be tough for him. I don't think Eubank's interested. I think Eubank likes talking about him, but I don't think he'll fight Eubank. I don't know what Golovkin does, really. He's always made 160 and he's always made it fine.
Yeah.
But at 41 to box at 168 and then come back down, and for what? Like middleweight right now is in the dogs, to be honest. It's not a great division. You've got, Jamal Charlo, who for a long time we as fans were like, Jamal's better than Jamel. We were looking at him, we was like, Jamal's better than Jamel. Now Jamel's gone way past him. And that's it. And then there's the other guy whose name I forgot, who's just won the WBO belt against Denzel Bentley. But there's nothing at middleweight right now for Golovkin. But to answer your question, I don't think Eubank fights him. I think Eubank chases the money fight.
Right. Yeah, definitely makes sense. All right, moving on that card. Joseph Parker, a heavyweight clash, 30-3, goes up against Jack Massey, 20-1. What do you think about this fight, Callum? And how much more does Parker have left?
Joe, he looked really good in the Chisora fights. I don't know if he looked really good or if Chisora's a shot to bits or a bit of both. Jack Massey's a really interesting matchmaking for me. And when it first happened, when it was first announced, it was like, well, this is random. But you know what? in Britain, Jack Massey's a localish lad. He'll be up for it. He will be up for this fight. And I'd rather they got in someone like him than some matey from Bulgaria that walks into the ring in a polo shirt and looks like shit. Like I'd rather see someone like that. And I think Parker will win. I think he'll probably get the stoppage. And I think, do you know what? I think he's actually up there. I think him and Dubois, sorry to talk about Dubois again, but I think him and Dubois would be quite an interesting fight. Joyce is actually at a really, really high level. And if they couldn't make the Fury-Usyk fight, I would be happy to see Fury against Joyce or Joyce against Usyk. I'd have no problem with that. I think Joyce is really good. And I'm not going to dig out Parker too much for losing that fight. I think Joyce is really good. I think Parker's fine. I think Parker has still got a little bit left.
Do you favor him in this fight against Massey?
Oh yeah. I think this fight is there to make him look good. But I think Massey will come for it, and I think he'll give an effort. But I think Parker's hand speed and it's just his overall kind of quality, I think he may get the stoppage.
Mike, what do you think? What's your take on this fight?
Bit of a bizarre matchup came out of nowhere, really. Not the biggest fan of Joseph Parker either, to be honest with you. I don't think he did. Obviously, he lost to Joe Joyce.
Tell us why. Before you go into it, tell us why.
Well, what does he do? I mean, he turned up and fought Anthony Joshua, didn't do anything. Good fight against Dillian White. Junior Farr, that was a kind of a close matchup. I don't think he looked too good there. I disagree with Callum on this one. I thought that both Derek Chisora fights were super, super close against very one-dimensional, washed-up, Derek Chisora. He got smoked by Joe Joyce. If he didn't have that adulation from the British fans, and if he didn't do those amazingly funny videos during COVID, would you really want to pay to see him? Because what does he do? He gets into like third gear, coasts, and is super defensive, in my opinion. I can't really think of a fight where I've gone, oh my God, Joseph Parker went in there and steamrolled that guy, of anyone of any note. I mean, when he won the WBO world title against Andrew Ruiz, that was a close fight. And he probably got that as a bit of home cooking because it was over in New Zealand. So yeah, I think he's overrated. I think I got out of the wrong side of the bed today, because I've been to every single fighter. I'm like, he's crap. Yeah, that's my honest opinion. I've said that before on here about Joseph Parker, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's a very strange matchup. Like Callum said, I think he's picked somebody from the weight division below. So the only thing that really makes this fight of any interest is if Jack Massey wins, essentially, because it's been picked a smaller opponent for Joseph Parker to probably look good against, because they've probably earmarked and penciled him in against somebody else. And obviously, to the build up to that fight, they want to be able to show Joseph Parker smoking somebody. So yeah, kind of want to go for the underdog, to be honest with you, and kind of like to upset the apple cart. It'd be kind of funny if Jack Massey won. So
do you favor Massey, or are you just
no, I don't favor it, but I'd like him to win just because Joseph Parker, I think, has kind of stolen a career so far.
but you think Parker is the favored fighter here to win this fight?
Sorry, say that again.
You think Parker is the legitimate favorite? You want Massey to win, but you think Parker is the proper?
Yeah, because he's not just stepping up 7 pounds from 147 to 154. He's going from cruiserweight to heavyweight, where you can weigh whatever the hell you want. So Jack Massey's got to build up in a short period of time weight, and it's probably not going to be good weight, right? He's not going to be building up solid muscle and also doing a hell of a lot of cardio. He may go about it completely the wrong way, put on 20 pounds of fat and get in there and hardly be able to move, and just turns into a punching bag for Joseph Parker, which is probably what the promotion want, essentially. But it's not going to be good for Jack Massey. But I'm hoping that, like Callum's correct, he puts on a little bit of weight, gets in there just super game and just goes for it. He's got absolutely nothing to lose, apart from the fact he may get knocked out, which obviously isn't going to be too good. But he's got nothing to lose in terms of us as fans, because it's win-win. He probably gets I hope he gets a heavyweight payday for it, because he's stepping up and doing it. And it's not his weight division. So, I kind of don't fancy the underdog, but I'd like to see the underdog go in there and cause a surprise, to be honest with you. Because a couple of times Joseph Parker's got in the ring recently and he's just looked fat. He doesn't even look like he's, trained too much. I hope I never see him in the street.
You never know after today.
I saw him at an event. I saw him at an event one time, and he's 100% not 6'3". Because I'm 6'3", and he's fucking substantially smaller than I was.
6'1", maybe.
I don't know. He might have even been fucking smaller, unless I was just having a very tall day that day. He wasn't that big at all, because I saw him in Vegas. Me and Stack spoke to him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could see that. But we will see on that fight after this Saturday. Also on the card, let's see if I can get this. Is it Iko?
Yep.
Iko Usman?
Correct. Very good.
All right. I was like, I think I'm going to butcher this one. Undefeated, 18-0, goes up against Chris Congo, 14-1 for the British Commonwealth welterweight title. All right, Callum, what do you think about this fight?
It's really good. It's actually, do you know what? This card is actually pretty good for a Sky box office pay-per-view. What I think I'm not sure what the cost is going to be. It would be around £25. What's that in dollars? 32, 33, something like that.
Right.
Which is still much more cheaper than your guys' pay-per-views.
It is.
But don't worry, we still get really angry about it over in Britain. We get really angry about the price going up every single time. But yeah, we love a British title fight. I'm always talking about the traditional route of going through Commonwealth title, British title, European, and working your way up to that world title level. And Essiman's been a good British champion and has been boxing really well at that level for a good while now. And him and Congo is actually a really, really good matchup. And it's actually really, really tough to pick. I think I'd probably go Essiman, probably just about fancy him just because he's been the championship distance that little bit more and has defended the title and has that experience. But it's a really good matchup. I think it's a really good advert for the British title. I'm a big proponent of the British title. I think it's really important for boxing in Great Britain, and I think it's going to be a good advert for it.
1995, Callum. I just looked it up.
1995 what?
Pounds. Sorry, £19, 95.
Oh, that's what the pay-per-view is going to cost.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Yeah.
What do you think about the fight, Mike?
I think it's a really good fight. This fight and the one we're going to speak about next is also a really good fight. Both of these two, very good standard. I could see whoever wins this going on, picking up, European going on to, world level, at least a challenge at world level. It's going to be a interesting matchup. Chris Congo's got those long levers, can make it like a kind of a boring fight if he decides to just box at distance. But it's really a really good, solid British 50-50 one on this. So if you're interested in watching this card, definitely watch this fight, and obviously the one that we're going to speak about next is also a really good fight. So for £20, honestly, I think it's actually, if the weather's like it is over here in California at the minute, and it's just been pissing down with rain here the last few days, if it's like that, it's definitely worth $20 or £20.
And then also on the card, like we were just talking about a second ago, Richard Riakporhe, 15-0, goes up against Krzysztof Glowacki, something like that.
I always call him Glowacki, but
Glowacki? Is that how you say it in the Polish?
I don't think so. But once I've decided that's how I'm going to say their name, that's it. Unless he walks up to me and tells me how to say it. I think. Do you know what? I remember Jimmy Lennon Jr. And he put a tweet out once, and he was talking about how to pronounce Lomachenko, and someone tried to correct him on how to say his first name, but he ended up saying no. I walked into the dressing room and asked him how to pronounce it. So if Mr. Glowacki or whatever, if he wants to, maybe just do a TikTok and just tell us how to pronounce it, and we'll all get it.
That's true, though. That's actually a good tidbit for fans and people alike of boxing. Always listen to the announcers, especially somebody like Jimmy Lennon Jr., who's a pro, obviously, because they have to announce these in front of the whole world, essentially. And a lot of them, and you would think all the professionals at least, go and they ask these fighters if they get the opportunity, like, hey, how do you pronounce your name? If it's not like a common name that they already know, they've heard it 1,000 times, they're gonna go ask the fighter, how do you pronounce your name? How do you like it pronounced? So that's always a key to look at.
With Lomachenko, it's spelt Vasil, but it's Vasily.
Right.
And everyone was saying, "Oh, it's Vasil. Why are you saying Vasily?" But he goes, "No, I went and asked him." And I think that's just such a nice touch. It's a small thing, but I think that's what makes Jimmy Lennon Jr. the best MC. I think he's the best. Not to go off on a tangent because we could sit here and argue about Buffer and Lennon and all that lot. But I think Jimmy Lennon's great, and those small things. And actually, on another note, I think it's actually good for fighters as well to do small things like that, to get into social media. You think about the Jake Pauls of this world and these YouTube fighters, they get social media and they get how to use it. And fighters, British fighters, just pro fighters in general, they'll tell their hard luck story and they'll talk about how hard they've trained in the gym. But these fun little things, if they started to do that instead, it might help promote them, and it might help for people to see a little bit more of their character.
That's true. I agree with that. What do you think about this fight, Callum? Riakporhe versus Glowacki.
Richard Riakporhe is a really interesting guy because he beat Chris Billam-Smith, who's the European champion at the minute, and was on a really good run. And then he disappeared for 2 years. And we didn't see him box for a couple of years, and it's like, what's happened to Richard Riakporhe? And I've been to his gym a couple of times, and the people down at Miguel's they're a lovely bunch of people. But he just disappeared, and then he's come back, and he's looked good. He's looked good, and he's doing the IBF route. And so Glowacki going the IBF route makes sense to take that fight. I think he'll win. I think he's just too fresh. And I think we saw when Akoli beat Glowacki that Glowacki was on the way out. And I think Richard Riakporhe is just I think he'll be too fresh, and I think he may get the stoppage.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Callum, to be honest with you, like I have done all show. It's too fresh. Glowacki's debut was October the 3rd, 2008.
Dang.
So, yeah, I think Callum touching on that he's going to be too fresh is 100% correct. But in terms of Richard Riakporhe, this is an unbelievable test for him. When you're getting in with somebody that's fought, Usyk, Vlasov, Mariusz Bradis, Okoli, Marco Huck back in the day. This is really just going to show you, where Richard Riakporhe is. It's in terms of matchmaking, perfect. Somebody that's still got name recognition, but is probably a little bit over the hill. And Riakporhe could go in there and really do a number on him. And like he just touched on, and he was out the ring for a considerable period of time. But if he gets Glowacki out of there, then he's back in the mix. He's certainly back into the mix, in my opinion. Because he's heavy-handed. He's someone that's perfect TV fighter, Richard Riakporhe. Because he just gets in there, he could be losing every single round, but at any moment, he can spark you out.
That's true. Running off that card, Fraser Clark 4-0 goes up against Kevin Nicholas Espindola. Callum, do we know anything about this fight? What do you think?
All I know is that people over in England are really angry about it. And I think people are really, Fraser Clark's boxed at an Olympic level, therefore he's an elite amateur. And so I think people, and he's not young either. He's not 25. He's not someone that's got loads of time on his side. He's someone that's kind of turned over a bit late, and you kind of want to see him get a wiggle on, for lack of a better word. And he's shown a frustration himself about how he's been matched. And do you know what? It sounds sick, but as I looked at the card and I saw Joseph Parker on the card and I saw Fraser Clark on the card, I was like, okay, let's get this out of the way and let's just match them two. Because I just think, what's Fraser Clark doing? What's he achieving? This isn't doing anything for him, boxing people, the guys at this level, really. He's, like I said, an elite amateur, someone that boxed at the very highest level of the amateur game. And so now he shouldn't be turning over pro and fighting puddings. He should be fighting decent fighters. Should be fighting at domestic title level, at least.
Like a Lomachenko when Lomachenko turned pro, like that?
Not that high, because for me, Lomachenko turned over one Olympics too late. He had one Olympic cycle too many. And that's why you can see that as fast as the rise was with Lomachenko, he dropped just as quickly.
Yeah.
It happened just as quickly because he turned over so late and a lot of wear and tear on his, not just in terms of fights, but the training, and he's had a lot of injuries. You can see it with Usyk as well, a lot of injuries because they've had a lot of wear and tear on their body. And I just think with Fraser Clark, it's like, what are you doing? Just box for the British title, box at that level, because if you box at British title level, it's not the highest standard in the world. It's a good standard, but everyone that gets in the ring wants to beat you. They want to win. They want to beat you. Whereas this guy's fighting on Saturday couldn't give a shit. All he's going to try and do is not get stopped so he can box again 2 weeks later. And that's just not good enough for Clark at this stage of the game.
What do you think, Mike?
No, 100%. I think the problem he has is when you've got people like Lomachenko and especially someone like Joe Joyce, who'd come from the amateurs into the pros, and Joe Joyce was just steamrolling people. You know, he had a very good, pro style. And he was knocking out like Benn, Stavern and people like that, like super early into his pro career. So I think that's now people have seen that. People expect that from the next person. And because Fraser Clark was older, Fraser Clark is also a heavyweight. People are like, okay, he should be doing the same trail as Joe Joyce. And, I agree. I think why not someone like a Nathan Gorman, Cash Ali, someone like that. They've got name recognition. They're British title level. It's a lot better than fighting a Kevin Nicholas Espindola who, nobody knows, pick up. Yeah, I'm the same. I love to see him get the Southern, then go for like English, British, European, internationals, stuff like that. That's still a hell of a lot of fights than fighting like Espindola, who's come for a payday, going to try and get through the fight again next week, pick up another payday because he's, just a journeyman essentially. So, it's kind of just a waste of time. It's a waste of time for him. It's a waste of time for us. He's 31 years old, and I'm sure, he wants to kind of, move quick as well. So he seems annoyed by it. So it's just like, okay, like who's agreeing to these fights? If it's not Fraser that's, agreeing to this and getting annoyed with it, then someone needs to have kind of a word with his manager. And I think, wasn't it his last fight? Even Benn was not impressed by the opponent. He kind of got annoyed with the fact that, he paid him all this money and the guy just kind of like took a dive essentially. So, yeah, let's hope after this one that enough people complain, and maybe even Fraser complains, that we see him in there with, more names, around the British title level. Not Dave Allen, but, someone like Cash Ali, I think would be a good opponent for him. Cash Ali's only got one defeat, hasn't he? When he bit
David Price.
David Price, right? Yeah. So someone like that, I think, would be, a perfect opponent for him.
That could work, possibly. Moving on to news and notes of this week's episode of The Last Round. Some UFC news that could possibly leak into the boxing world. I guess you could call him the former heavyweight champion of the world for the UFC, Francis Ngannou. Dana White, the president of the UFC, recently stated that he was released from his contract with the UFC. Ngannou has been talked about with Tyson Fury in a possible exhibition boxing match. Callum, let's start with you. Now that it's been official, the UFC said it, Dana White said it, he's out of his contract, he's a free agent. Do you think, especially with, the popularity of boxing that we've seen, with these exhibitions, these social media stars and all that, even Conor McGregor, Mayweather years ago, does Ngannou see that opportunity to fight in a heavyweight exhibition boxing match against Tyson Fury as a real possibility?
I think he has to think that. I think he has to think that the thing is, the UFC, you're leaving them. You're not just leaving the heavyweight title behind. You're leaving the machine and the branding. And as MMA is, we talk about boxing being a niche sport. MMA is even more niche. So you need that brand. You need that branding and the machine to push you along as an entity. And I think if he's leaving UFC and leaving the machine behind, he must think he's got something lined up. I don't think it's Fury. I think it could be Wilder. Because Wilder Ruiz has gone very quiet.
It has. That's true. I didn't think about that.
And if there's a fighter that would make it, it's Wilder, and if there's a network that would put it on, it's Showtime. They would put it on, and I'd love that. I wouldn't give Ngannou much of a chance. I think being an MMA striker and being a punching striker is two completely different things, and I think we saw that with Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor looked like a monster puncher, and then he fought a 41-year-old Floyd and looked like he couldn't punch at all. I think he'd get found out, Ngannou, but it'd be fun to watch.
What do you think, Mike?
No, I agree. I think we'll see him in there because, like you said, like where else does he go? Right, you can't. Bellator doesn't have the sort of money that the UFC can afford to pay. I don't see PFL having that sort of money either. Maybe one championship out in Asia. They're sticking.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe over there in Asia, Japan.
Yeah, I know that they seem to have a big pot of money, but I know that they seem to. I think they also make a loss. So whoever owns them, is just, I don't know, got an endless amount of money, I guess, because I know that they do good numbers out there, but I think they pay really well, and I don't think they've been generating much profit. I could see him maybe come do a couple of like exhibition sort of thing and then go back with his tail between his legs back to the UFC maybe. Gets in there with like a Tyson Fury. They pay an exorbitant amount of money, like out in, Dubai or something like that. Tyson does like an exhibition with him, do something to just get a huge, payday, life-changing money. I know Sean Strickland, who's in the same gym as him, kind of mentioned that he was going to go and get, I think, life-changing money. I think he said, or was it fuck you money or something like that? Strickland said so. I mean, and another thing as well, I could see him turn up in WWE.
I mean, yeah, you know what? That's something. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
He's got a Adonis body like myself. And, I could see him in the WWE, kind of like Ken Shamrock style, the world's baddest man.
Yeah.
Essentially left the UFC with the title, right?
Yeah.
He can kind of claim that.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge wrestling nerd. So it depends who owns it. Who owns WWE because it's on the market at the minute.
Yeah. And
it depends who's got the book because if it's Triple H or if it's Vince, you don't know. But you know what? Vince would love him. And I think Triple H would probably love him as well. So
I'm sure, what? I'm sure that conversation, now that they know that he's a free agent, I wouldn't even doubt that as soon as they saw that news, they're like, they all texted each other. Or somebody texted the powers that be like, hey, we should look into this.
I'm going to go even further.
With Lesnar there, think about it.
I'm going to go even further. Saudi Arabia, WWE, Ngannou, Fury. Baddest man on the planet in UFC, baddest man in boxing.
You know what? I could see Saudi Arabia telling WWE, hey, get that. Make that happen. I could see that. Yeah.
It is WrestleMania season.
Yeah.
Because if he's turning down supposedly the biggest ever heavyweight contract, according to what Dana White said, somebody's been in his ear. When somebody's giving you that amount of money on a contract, sign it and you've got guaranteed money. Somebody's obviously reached out and told him like, hey, there's a bigger pot at the end of this rainbow if you get out of this contract. And you would imagine it's going to be something certain. And I would imagine because, giving up that in a sport where you know what you're doing, he's been fighting in MMA for so many years, to just turn and maybe get a couple of fights in boxing. Because what happens if he gets in there? Box is somebody that's supposed to be a gimme. This person sees it as his World Cup final and sparks him out because it's a different sport. We've seen like Tyrone Woodley and people like that, Ben Askren, lose to Jake Paul, who'd just taken up boxing pretty much as a hobby and has turned it into what he has. So it's a huge risk because you could get in there and get smoked and then that money disappears.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. But you're right, though. I think that's a good point to make, that the UFC, Dana White did say that Ngannou was offered the highest contract ever for a heavyweight. And he even said specifically, I think if I remember seeing the clip, he said even more than Lesnar. Because I think up until this point, Lesnar was the highest paid heavyweight they've ever had, I think. So, I mean, you would think that somebody was in Ngannou's ear telling them like, no, he's like, we can give you this opportunity or these opportunities over here. Maybe it was WWE, maybe it was Tyson Fury and boxing, some boxing matches. I don't know. I think the dark horse here is, like Callum said, maybe Wilder. Maybe Wilder's popping up there. Yeah, you know what? I could, now that you mentioned it, I didn't think about it before, but I could see it. I could see it. And Showtime and Steven Espinoza would love to put that on. They would
They
love to put
would.
that on. So, yeah, I can definitely see that. But I do on this topic. Let's conclude it on this topic here, saying percentage wise, Callum, what this year do we see Ngannou in a boxing match, whether it's exhibition or I guess professional? What's the percentage chance here?
I'd say 70. I think chances are. I think chances are that's the route he's going to go down. WWE, I think he could do it. I think that's possible, but I think boxing is far more likely. And he's a puncher, and yeah, whether it's an exhibition or if he just knocks over a pudding or two and then goes back to UFC and fights John Jones, maybe.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say 70%.
What do you think, Mike? Percentage chance this year?
It's interesting because my initial thought is obviously, they've already spoke about Ngannou doing it with Tyson Fury, but if Tyson Fury, is going to do that fight with Alexander Usyk, then okay, we could get Ngannou and Fury maybe towards the end of the year. But Ngannou's already sat out pretty much the entire, I do follow both. He fought at the start of the year, had an injury, and sat out the rest of, 2022. And you only get paid when you fight. So I'm sure that he's obviously looking at trying to do something. So, yeah, I would say maybe an exhibition towards the end of the year against someone like Tyson Fury. And my initial thought was, he'd fight Tyson Fury, get some huge payday, and then goes back to the UFC because for Tyson Fury and for Ngannou, I think the WWE aspect is going to be there for forever. It's not going to go away. The contract might be slightly bigger if they went, whilst they're both kind of essentially holding world titles because they can go in like Ken Shamrock did, world's most dangerous man, stuff like that. And then have that little kind of like gimmick of like, who's the most dangerous, MMA or boxing sort of thing, which would be kind of fun to watch. But yeah, I'll give it a high percentage, like 70, 80% that we see him in some type of exhibition towards the end of the year. Probably Tyson Fury because they've already done a little face-off and stuff like that, so...
And then I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode. AJ, Anthony Joshua, has been reported to be with different trainers again, but we've heard Derek James's name a lot. There was pictures released of him training with Derek James in that stable in the state of Texas here in the United States. Callum, what do you think about that potential matchup?
I don't like it. I don't. Nothing against Derek James at all. I just think Joshua doesn't know who he is or what he is. Or I think there's a lot of confusion going on in Anthony Joshua's head. And he did it with Robert Garcia. He tried out all these trainers and was like, "Oh, I'll go with Robert Garcia." And I think he boxed slightly better in the second Usyk fight. But I think, back-to-back losses, then, obviously stopped by Ruiz as well. I think there's got to be a lot of doubt in his head. And for me, what he actually needs is to kind of go back to basics and kind of get rid of 20 people out of the entourage and go with a Mark Tibbs or someone just down to earth, a shitty gym, but good enough where, he's gonna get good sparring and he's going to be trained well and he can just get back to basics. And I think this is just him seeing a good trainer, a really good trainer in Derek James and going, he'll fix me. Yes. Instead of fixing himself. And I don't think it makes any difference for him. I think as soon as he steps in with an elite fighter, whether it's, Tyson Fury or even Deontay Wilder, I think he'd lose. I think he'd lose again. I don't think it makes any difference.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the identity portion of AJ. I think he doesn't really know who he is anymore. He's trying to figure it out, especially after the loss to Ruiz. And then, then he won the titles back and he was on a winning streak again. But then the Usyk fights and, he's kind of in a confused state, like, oh, okay, where am I? Who am I here in the sport? I was at the top of the game for so long. I was one of the main guys essentially next to Canelo, but where am I now? So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Also, news and notes. Oscar De La Hoya, within the last couple days, tweeted that, we're paraphrasing here, but something saying that he hasn't received a contract for the Ryan Garcia Gervonta Davis fight, and if he didn't receive it by Monday, which is when we're recording this episode today, January 16th, 2023, that he will be moving on. Even though a month or so ago, the networks, the Zone, Showtime, their executives and promoters and all that all kind of put out statements saying there was a deal in place, everything was kind of agreed to in terms, but then subsequent reports started saying, well, there's not really any contract that's been signed. There's nothing that's been signed yet. There's just, they had discussions, exchanging details back and forth, and there was a framework, I guess, agreed upon between the networks, broadcasters, promoters, and all that. But Callum, De La Hoya tweeting this out. I mean, obviously, sometimes every couple of weeks he goes on a rant on Twitter and he starts tweeting all this kind of stuff, emotional stuff. What's your take on this? When you saw that, what'd you think?
Oh, bless him. Oh, Oscar. I just thought, oh, bless him. But I saw Ryan Garcia, it was only a few days ago, saying, yeah, we've agreed it. It's fine. We just got to sort, a date and a venue out. And I still believe in Tank Garcia. I still believe it will happen until it's off, until Garcia signs to fight somebody else. I think Garcia made a big move by not taking an interim fight. I think that's him really going all in on this fight, on the Tank fight. I'm not sure it's good for his preparation, but it's him saying, no, I want that fight. I'm going all in on that fight. And so I still think it will happen. I think Oscar's perhaps been frustrated by a couple of things, but I think it will happen. I still believe in it.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it happens. I think we're all kind of like getting sick to death of all these sort of fights, like, Davis Garcia, the Spence Crawford, the camp's always talking about it and saying it's going to happen. And then, they always fall through at the last minute. So let's, fingers crossed, and let's be, positive in 2023. And like Callum touched on, I think the fact that he chose not to fight Masito Hester hopefully shows how much he's put into this one, and he wanted to just concentrate on camp, and because that was essentially going to be an easy payday, right? Against someone like Masito Hester, so much smaller, so much lighter. Stylistically, it was kind of an easy win, I thought, for Ryan Garcia, so I'm surprised he didn't take it. I think that shows how much that he wants it, how much his camp wants it and stuff like that. So, yeah, fingers crossed they don't be too stubborn and stuff like that on the A side, B side sort of things. And we get to see it April 15th.
And then one last thing on that Gervonta Davis situation and Ryan Garcia. Davis obviously just had a fight against Hector Luis Garcia, another Garcia. It was another Showtime pay-per-view. They reported sellout in Washington, D.C., just under 20,000 people. We haven't had any pay-per-view numbers released for his fight, but everybody's favorite old school boxing guy, Rick Glazer, always comes out with something, and he was tweeting, I don't know if it was yesterday or sometime today or within the last day and a half or so, he was going back and forth with people in terms of releasing the whoever his source is, releasing the numbers for the Tank pay-per-view against Hector Luis Garcia. Rick Glazer said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it in front of me, he said that he doesn't want to put it out there yet, tweet it out, because he said, and he kind of goes on these rants, he says, because it's so low, I want to verify it with a second source. So, I'm sure he's doing whatever he needs to do, whether you believe him or not. He puts it out there, and if you go at him, he'll go right back at you. But within those tweets and those responses and those replies, he was replying to people who were saying, well, was it lower than this? Was it lower than that? He did say that, and Mike, you kind of helped me out with this. He did say it was above 50,000 buys, but below what?
Above 50, below 120. With people saying, was it this, was it that? And he would say lower, higher. So somewhere between that. The ones he didn't answer were the ones that said around 70 to 77,000. So maybe that's around the ballpark, and he didn't seem to reply to those ones.
So the reason I bring that up, Callum, is because there's a big, obviously for Tank Garcia, they both bring heavy money to the table in their fight against each other in their own respective ways. But traditionally, at least in boxing, that your performance, on pay-per-view ratings, gates, the drawing power you have in arenas usually tips the hand for you. We've seen it over the years: De La Hoya, Mayweather, Pacquiao, all those big guys, Canelo now, all that stuff. Tank has proven that he can draw in these arenas: Atlanta, Washington D.C., Baltimore, all that stuff. And people show up and they come and they pay to see him. But a lot of the focus is on the gate that he generates, the sellout crowds. Do you think that's kind of how where boxing is going now, Callum? Is that, okay, well, the pay-per-view market is so difficult to penetrate now because of the digital age that we're in. There's so many streaming options. There's so many illegal ways to stream something that the power of a fighter is now going to be the gate that they generate physically at the venue that they fight at.
Yeah, and I think now I always think about Prime Manny Pacquiao and him drawing 1 million pay-per-view buys against Josh Clottey.
Yeah.
That was the peak of boxing pay-per-view, that a fighter, a welterweight, not even a heavyweight, could draw 1 million pay-per-view buys against Josh Clottey. Just a nice enough guy, not a particularly exciting fighter. It wasn't a particularly exciting fight. There wasn't really any bad blood between them, but they go and do 1 million buys because Manny Pacquiao was that big a star.
Right.
And I think, I think those days are long gone now. Even a Canelo Alvarez, who's, I think fair to say is the biggest draw in boxing, the biggest draw in professional boxer in the world. What does he do? 300,000? Something like that, about 300,000 for a base for a standard kind of fight. Maybe a Caleb Plant. What was that? 300,000, something like that.
Reportedly,
I just think the market now is not what it was. And if Tank did 100,000 the other day against Garcia, do you know what? I think that's all right. I think that's okay. I think that's fine. Apparently, Terence Crawford did 10,000 in his fight against. Evanescence the other week. It was David Meltzer, the wrestling writer, that put that out, that he did about 10,000.
I wonder how Meltzer got those numbers, because BLK Prime they did their own pay-per-view, and I know I'm pretty sure the pay-per-view was also distributed on the satellite channels and stuff like that. So I'm assuming Meltzer maybe has sources within that industry.
Yeah.
But
you would think so. And the thing with Showtime as well is their pay-per-view price is pretty set, isn't it? They don't really go below $80. It's a high price, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a high price for a Showtime pay-per-view. And so I think a lot of people are going, no thanks. Plus, people know that the Garcia fight's next, that this is just the tune-up for Garcia.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a whole lot of energy to pump out $70 now, because now I'm going to keep that $70 for when it's Garcia. I don't think it's really anything to worry about. And if he did 100,000, I think that's okay. And like you said, he's a good ticket seller as well. I think you need both, but the market's just not what it was.
Right. Yeah, it is definitely difficult. And I always wondered too, I think Mike and I have talked about this before, if you put somebody like Tank, who's obviously got popular on regular Showtime, instead of these pay-per-views, like, how does the rating do when people who just have the regular Showtime subscription, I don't have to pay $80 to watch his fight. It's just free on Showtime for my $10 subscription. I wonder what his rating would do, But I know the pay-per-view helps pay the fighter purses, and Tank, makes, pretty high amounts of money and all that. It's a high-profile fight for him. But I do wonder, putting him on regular Showtime right now, even if it's against like a Hector Luis Garcia, what kind of rating would he pop? What do you think?
Well, you think about an Errol Spence, when Errol Spence was coming up. Was it Leonard Bundu? And he stopped him, and I think he did like 5 million viewers or something. He did
I believe that. Yeah, was that Fox or was that Showtime?
It might have been Fox, actually.
Yeah.
And I think if you put Tank on Fox, because Showtime's like a premium cable thing, isn't it? It's
right.
It's not something that everybody has. Pardon my ignorance, because...
Well, actually, if you put it when they put it on pay-per-view, it's obviously a pay-per-view matchup on Fox. But Fox, the channel, is actually a basic channel that even if you don't pay for cable or satellite, if you just have the antenna or the digital antenna or whatever you have in your TV, you could get the Fox channel. So it's actually more readily available in homes in the United States than a lot of other channels if you put it on without pay-per-view.
So am I right in thinking that Fox, that makes sense to me, but what about Showtime? Is Showtime something more premium that you have to
Showtime
subscribe to?
Considered in the United States a premium channel, a premium subscription that you have to pay for in order to be able to watch.
Yeah. So to answer your question, if Tank was to box on Fox, which I know, PBC and Showtime, they have a good relationship, I think he might do 3-4 million views, and you think about what some of the guys have done on ESPN. They've done good numbers on ESPN, haven't they? Some of the fights. So, and do you know what? You make a really good point, because building up to this Garcia fight, wouldn't it have made sense to go on Fox and get as many eyes onto that as possible, have Ryan Garcia ringside, and then that's your fight, and then that's how you market it. So, but they wanted to pay Tank, and Tank has a price, and so the only way they can pay that price is to, go through pay-per-view, I guess.
Right, yeah. It's like Andy Ruiz. Ever since the AJ fight, he's been on pay-per-view ever since, and is he really giving you the profit back? Is it? But he's been on pay-per-view since, because now he's hit a threshold in his pay, which is, I think, minimum $1 million. It's been reported his purse is $1 million, or at least a little bit more than that. But does he bring the profit back, because it's been pay-per-views? So
yeah. Am I right? Didn't Furman have a pay-per-view fight not long ago? It wasn't his last fight on pay-per-view.
I think he's been pay-per-view for a couple of years now, right, Mike? Keith Thurman?
Well, he had the Pacquiao one, didn't he? And then who?
That was the last one, wasn't it?
Yeah, then Spence next.
Josezito Lopez?
I don't think that was... I think that was Fox.
Right.
I think that was regular Fox. I don't think that was a pay-per-view fight.
I think it was Fox, yeah.
Mario Barrios. Was that? I feel like that was on pay-per-view.
I think it was, because I think Thurman is also in that pay-per-view realm where and Fox, and he's been on Fox too. He hasn't been on Showtime. Fox, it's interesting to see that. I wonder if Fox has told PBC hey, we want Spence, we want Thurman, and we want Wilder or something. But I know Fox, I think, reportedly came to a decision with them saying, hey, don't give us any fights unless it's pay-per-view, because we're not going to put up the money to put on these fights, because a lot of the fights they've had on Fox in that partnership with them have been pay-per-view, the last several.
Yeah.
So I think Thurman's been on Fox a lot the last couple
that was my point. PBC as an entity have really flooded the pay-per-view market, and that's going to affect buys as well, because people are going to be like, well, I'm not paying for that. And it's happening over here in England as well. Eubank Smith, it's a decent card, but neither of those are pay-per-view fighters. You don't look either of those as pay-per-view fighters. But I've just looked it up. Furman Barrios was a pay-per-view, and it did about 39,000 buys. Yeah. That's what's happened, I think, with pay-per-view as well. It's just become so flooded now. Plus, you've got DAZN. There's a subscription with DAZN, and I don't know what the output is like on DAZN in America, but over here in the UK, it's really poor. It's not good at all.
Yeah.
And so, I just think boxing fans are fed up of just paying here, there, and there to watch. A lot of the time, not watch the fights that they really want to watch. So it's a shame. It's a shame, but at some point, these executives need to bang their heads together and make the fights that people want to see. Otherwise, it's not good for boxing at all.
Yeah, definitely. But we're still here. We're still talking about it, banging the drum here. So if it happens, we'll definitely be here to witness it. But Callum, we definitely appreciate you jumping here on the last round. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we've been trying for quite a while to schedule this, and we're glad we finally scheduled it. But before we go ahead and let all of our listeners know where they can find you and follow you all over media.
Yeah, so it's Below the Belt podcast. We're the yellow logo with the red on it. There's that other guy that did a Below the Belt podcast, but we were first. We were like a year before that guy. I can't remember his name. He's the MMA guy. All my social media handles are the same. It's at BC the Grand Slam, which is a wrestling reference. I won't bore you with the story behind it all, but I'm that much of a wrestling fan that my social media has a wrestling theme to it. So yeah, you can follow me on all the social medias on that handle. And yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful. I had a really good time talking to you guys.
We appreciate it. Mike, as we sign off here, you know the usual. Let them know where they can find us.
We are at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next time. We'll be reviewing and previewing all the latest fights and latest news.
So for our guest of the week, Callum from Below the Belt podcast, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.